Last season on Serenbe Stories, we took a look inside what it's like to work at Serenbe and brought in our Director of Community Operations, Amy Peterson, and HR Director, Stephanie Coyne, to interview each other. The response was great. So we've brought Stephanie back with another interview that puts the spotlight on another one of our amazing employees. For this week's Serenbe Stories takeover, Stephanie's talking with Gil Mathis, our CFO, who also lives in Serenbe. Gil and his wife, Jeny, are both longtime fixtures in the community, and they first discovered Serenbe while looking for a way to mix up their typical vacation routine, and what they found changed their lives. After a few visits and a faithful trip to the real estate office, that's hard to resist, Gil left his corporate finance job and took a role with Serenbe Real Estate before transitioning into his current position as Chief Financial Officer. In today's conversation, Stephanie chats with Gil about his family's journey to Serenbe, his love-hate relationship with our sports leagues, his deep appreciation for an Excel spreadsheet, and so much more. This one you won't want to miss.
After having been here for a day, maybe, my wife walked into the real estate office without me, and they tell me that she immediately started to cry. Like she tried to speak, and then she started crying before she could speak. And later, having gone on to work in the real estate office, I know exactly what that means, and I know what they were thinking, which is, you hug the person and you're happy because you know you're going to get a sale. I mean,
Hi, Gil.
Hey, Stephanie.
It's fun to see you here in the office, Gil.
This is my favorite place to be.
I think we should set the tone right off the bat and set maybe the scene for our listener of where we are. As anybody can imagine, I'm interviewing you, so we are in a dank basement. Probably one hanging light bulb right above you. You're in a metal chair that you cannot move from, and I'm going to come at you hard with this investigative journalism.
Do we have coffee?
Of course.
Okay, but it's cold.
I'm not inhuman. Yes, but it's cold. So thanks for being my technically first guest on this podcast takeover by Human Resources.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what I did to deserve that honor, but
could go either way.
I think I can handle it. So good luck to both of us, I guess.
Well, you're a fun combo guest because you are an employee of Serenbe, which is why I'm interviewing you, but you're also a resident of Serenbe of how many years? I truly do not know.
So we first bought a property that was a second home in the spring of 2014. So 8.5 years, I think.
Yeah. Coming up on 10.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into how did you ever hear about Serenbe? How did you end up here? Not literally, but how did you convince your family to come here? How did it all go down?
Yeah. So the full version, I guess, starts with my wife. I had not heard of Serenbe. My wife was teaching yoga in North Atlanta, and we had been going on vacation with my family for Thanksgiving for several years and had just gotten into a rut of going to just what I thought were fairly terrible places. And we wanted to go somewhere better, closer maybe. And my wife's yoga class told her, she mentioned that we were looking for a place to go. And they said, oh, you've got to try out Serenbe. It's perfect for you. And they started describing it. She had never heard of it. And she said, yeah, this does sound perfect. So she booked something. She told me about it. I went to look at the website, as you do. And I don't know if there might be other people around in the office who remember what the website looked in 2013. It was basically a map, just a drawn map, probably a fill tab map, and a few paragraphs that didn't really make any sense to me as somebody who had no context.
Sure.
So we showed up for Thanksgiving not having any idea what this place was going to be. But after having been here for a day, maybe, my wife walked into the real estate office without me. And they tell me that she immediately started to cry. Like she tried to speak, and then she started crying before she could speak. And later, having gone on to work in the real estate office, I know exactly what that means. And I know what they were thinking, which is, you hug the person and you're happy because you know you're going to get a sale. I mean, if this is going to be an easy one. So she convinced me to visit the real estate office that weekend, and we just were really intrigued. Saw an old acquaintance that I hadn't seen in several years that Sunday as we were leaving, who had moved here, and spoke to that person and basically said, people really live here? Is it real that people live here? And they had moved here in 2008 and loved it. So we just were really drawn to it and came back to visit a couple of times, and then decided to buy something as a second home maybe 2 months after that, because we had seen, our kids were probably like 12 and 14 or something at the time, and we had seen them just light up beyond what we had seen them in other ways with everything available to them here. And we both remembered what it was like growing up, being able to just run in the woods and the fields to the neighbors or whatever, and your parents didn't know where you were. And we realized that our kids had none of that. They were in a 100% locked down, structured environment where we knew exactly where they were every minute of every day. And we said, well, we never really, it was not on my bucket list to own 2 homes in Fulton County, Georgia, but this seems like something that could be really good for our family. So we did it. And then fast forward 6 months, a year, as we're spending more and more time here, it was supposed to be my wife's place. It really did fit her to a T and everything in her worldview. But I was the one who was really awakened by it and started developing relationships here and was really attached to it, and decided that I basically wanted to stop doing what I was doing, which was a really, really boring and difficult corporate career in finance, and move here. And crazy enough, I was going to sell real estate. The real estate team is the thing that was going to be sort of my transition into retirement. So after a couple of years of figuring that out, that's what happened. We kept a place in Atlanta for our kids to finish high school at that time. And I started working here, and we kind of commuted back and forth. And then by 2021, both of our kids were out of high school, on to college. We sold the Atlanta place. My wife and I were both here full time. So we've been involved here for a long time, full time only since 2021. But, emotionally full-time from 2014 on.
So ironic that you ended up working at the real estate office, given how your Serenbe story started.
Yeah, and especially that boring corporate career that I referred to was as an actuary. And a lot of people don't know what an actuary is, but they're the people.
But everyone agrees it sounds boring.
It sounds boring. And I like to tell people they're the people that accountants make jokes about for how boring they are. So I think only at Serenbe would somebody like Garni Nygren see something in an actuary and say, you would be good at selling real estate. And I thought she was crazy, but I later came to understand why she thought that I would be good at it. And I don't know that I ever was really good at it, but I added a lot to the office, let's say. And, we were really community ambassadors as much as anything, and selling the lifestyle in the community. And Serenbe had changed my life. So it was easy for me to connect to that. I wasn't really connected to what I was doing before. And B, tell my story. And sometimes that would motivate people.
Sure. And it was genuine.
It was absolutely
because that really
genuine.
is how you felt when you moved here. So that's an easy story to tell, and it's easy to understand how other people can feel that way.
And part of what I was seeking was something that was more authentic. I worked for a good company, and it was a good career, but it was incredibly difficult and having no attachment to what we were ultimately doing. And, it was mainly people fighting over money in one form or another. To have the authenticity to be here and talk about a place like this that has changed my life and a lot of other people's lives that I've seen firsthand. Yeah, there's an energy in that you can't really reproduce, or at least someone like me can't reproduce in a job where those things aren't true.
Sure. We should pause for a second to identify that you are married to maybe the most amazing person on earth, a beloved Jeny Mathis, who is so great that she will just have her own interview on the Serenbe Stories. And it was like, we didn't want to put her in with you for this thing. And, she needs the full sun.
Just too much firepower.
Too much power.
She definitely deserves her own podcast. She is an amazing woman. And it has been really wonderful and gratifying to see her be here full time as empty nesters, kids away, and getting involved in the community in just every way possible. And really, she makes Serenbe a better place for sure as a resident. So I'm all for you diving in with her separately.
Yeah, it won't get to be me, I'm sad to say. But I did want to say why she was maybe not here. It was an appropriate thing. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so how long did you end up working in the real estate office?
5 years, I think, technically in the end. The last year or so, I was part-time because we had started a process of recapitalizing the development company. We needed a new financial partner. We were going to exit one financial partner and attract another, and it turned out to be a set of others. And I was part of a group that was putting the package together to go raise money to do that, and had gotten really deep in that and just didn't, it was much harder for me to have the time to sell the real estate. And I was extremely attached to that project, and it was of critical importance. So really, I was, in the heart of selling real estate for probably 3.5 to 4 years. And then in that last year, as I was part-time, I was transitioning into this new job for the development company.
And as I recall, that transition was happening right in the throes of 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic, which was the first time that you and I did any kind of project together. That
period was such a blur, I think that's right.
Yeah.
But there were so many things going on at that time, and so many, the world in many senses was a very dark place. Serenbe, as we know, and I'm sure has been touched on, many times in this podcast, had become a little bit of a beacon for many people, and it was actually exploding in growth, and we were getting new neighbors every day, and there was actually a lot of excitement around that. So it was a really, really interesting time, and to be working on a project that was pretty all-consuming to raise money from a group of investors to recapitalize the company, it runs together in my mind for sure. It was a weird time.
Yeah. I was referring to the project that the residents put together that you spearheaded. I don't know if you want to tell our listener about that, because you really took on maybe much more than you thought you were. But I really think it speaks to like your genuine, and the residents actually, but your genuine willingness and your heart for the people of Serenbe, even those that don't live here. Like, I don't know, it's maybe 90% of our employees don't live in Serenbe.
Right. Yeah, it was such a strange time because truly unprecedented things were happening, and we were figuring things out, as we went day to day. And there was just a wave of, as every business, and in the hospitality space, the restaurant space, certainly in the beginning, every business was just shut down more or less overnight, and trying to figure out what to do with employees. And then there were the federal government programs coming in to try to help people. But there were a lot of people being laid off, and temporarily or permanently in a very short fashion. And nobody quite knew what to do in a scenario like that, because none of us had ever seen it. So Serenbe is a place that, it's a really special place for many reasons. And probably the one that's most significant to me is just the connection, the connection of the people, and people know each other and care about each other. And so I just thought that it would be pretty easy to get the community to put some private funds together to try to help the employees that had been laid off. And so you helped me figure out, as we went step by step, what's a fair way to do this and a reasonable way to do this. And certainly there were some aspects that worked out, being I think the saying is no good deed goes unpunished,
right. Yep.
Like dealing with GoFundMe and PayPal,
right,
and trying to jump through the hoops to make this work. But we made it all work in the end, and the employees seemed quite grateful for it, and the community felt great doing it. And it just struck my heart as something that would be very easy to do in this space. So why not do it?
Turned out to be not that easy to do, but you still got it done. And it was my first glimpse into knowing how much you love an Excel spreadsheet. That
was really probably a big driver of getting into it. It was a great opportunity.
You got to build a spreadsheet. You do love it. Okay, so after that big transition is the position you're in now, which is our Chief Financial Officer of Serenbe Development. I think it is probably worth explaining, best you can, what that means, Serenbe Development.
Serenbe Development. Well, so Serenbe is a special place, and it's a lot of things, but one of the main things it is a neighborhood, a community that is under development. We have land that we currently own that has not yet been developed into usable lots for people to build homes on. So that is the core of what our development activities are, is taking that land and putting in, whether it's roads or sewer infrastructure, water, et cetera, doing all the things necessary to turn into lots to sell to either builders to buy homes or to sell directly to individuals to build a custom home.
Right. And then you are sort of monitoring,
with a lot of
advocating.
numbers. You can just imagine the volume of numbers that go along with something like that. And for me personally, having been part of the effort to raise the money to recapitalize the development company, a project that was very successful in the end, and the fact that most of our investors, we have a relatively small number of investors, and most of them live in Serenbe. And I considered, many of them to be friends, neighbors and friends. And having been part of convincing them to invest in the recapitalizing of the company to make sure that Serenbe can be completed according to the vision to the fullest extent possible, having invested myself in that effort, I felt like it would be a good idea to stay involved in the numbers and to make sure that we're on track to deliver what we said we would deliver to these investors. And it turned out that the time in the real estate office was great training for that, just sort of understanding the vision for the neighborhood and the sales process, which is important to our activities. If we don't ultimately sell the lots, then there's no point in developing them. So the training there was really helpful. So yeah, it's mainly overseeing the accounting, the financial reporting. I interact from a financial point of view a lot with our investors, with our board of directors, things like that.
So you leave this, your words, boring actuary job in Atlanta, true story. And then you come here and you work in the real estate office, and then the big transition happens. And my memory of that, April 1st, 2021, was it really felt like we have been saved. Gil Mathis has stepped in. He's done all this talking and this doing and the setting up of that you meet this person and this person, And it was like the sun opened up again. And then we all came to work in this office again, which after that big transition, including you. So now you've left this boring actuary job. Then you got to work with fun people in the real estate office and maybe make your own hours somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, we were pretty busy. So one thing about real estate is you often end up on other people's schedules, which is just a necessary part of the deal. So I probably actually could make my own hours in this job a little easier than that job. But I did find myself in an office again.
Sure.
Looking, out a window and having a computer that's like fixed on a desk and people sitting around. For a moment, it was a little surreal. But I remember thinking that I guess I'd missed it a little bit, and I was glad to be in an office environment again.
And you're talking about here in our office.
Yes.
This is tracking for me. Because it definitely felt like you really enjoyed being back in the office. You enjoyed the witty banter. We have a very open office environment. And now we're approaching the 2-year mark of you, quote, working in the office. And we see you less and less. Did you finally decide it's too much talking, it's too much banter?
The CFO job, we have a phenomenal controller, Barb, who we got to get Barb on the podcast at some point. I can't even imagine the fireworks. She is phenomenal. We tried to set this up in a way that my job is not a full-time job. And we've finally gotten to that point that things are sort of under control enough, although there's never any controlling, what Steve Nygren is going to do. His visions are bigger than I think any of us.
Part of the fun.
That's right, can contain. But, we've got the trains are running on the tracks like fairly well. So I don't need to be in here full time. And I've reduced the time that I spend here because I like to tell people the only thing better than maybe being a kid growing up in Serenbe is being an empty nester in Serenbe. It is so much fun. So yeah, my wife and I are trying to enjoy that, what I call semi-retired life, which puts me in the office a little less maybe than you would like to see, I realize.
Sure, for a variety of reasons that we won't go into here. And of course, I'm teasing you, as every single person in the office likes to do. Sometimes to your face, sometimes when you're not here. That's probably the most fun.
Right. You're clearly the ringleader of that. But yes,
I'll take that.
It's not just you.
I'll accept it. Put on my cape. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about you working in the office in Serenbe at whatever capacity you are doing it, hours in the office. What are some of the things that we do in the office that you enjoy?
As you said, the witty banter is pretty great. There is an exceptionally clever group of people here and no walls. There are no offices of any kind and people coming and going. There's just a lot of energy. It's a very organic sort of place to work. And so you just never know what people are going to be getting up to and kind of making fun of each other on any given day. That I enjoy for sure.
One of my favorite things that we do is our Halloween celebration. And I have asked the producer of this podcast to put this photo up on the Serenbe Stories. But 2 years ago, I was you for Halloween. It might be my finest moment.
You did a great job.
My favorite part was that I was sitting at your desk when you came in, and it took you a full 10 seconds to understand what was happening.
Well, I think I understood immediately what was happening. There's that process of like, is this really happening? And what possibly could have gotten her to this point. But yeah, you did a great job, down to the point of I had a broken wrist, I think, a broken finger, a cast, and you had replicated every inch of like a typical workday outfit for me.
You're a great interview, Gil, because you're just feeding me the segues left and right. Much like remember like a radio show, because you and I are about the same age. I've taken some callers before this interview, but I really just asked them, like, what is something you would like to know about Gil? Because I think we want to know more about you than you are ever going to be willing to tell us.
Definitely true.
One of your coworkers wants to know, speaking of the broken wrist and broken finger, have you always been accident prone?
No, not at all.
I'm speaking of that you used to be a very active member of the Serenbe Sports, I don't know what they're calling it now, Federation?
I hope not, but yeah, rec league sports. And yeah, it has been many years since I played in like rec league softball, which is one of the sports, or I don't think I've ever been involved in an adult kickball league until now.
It's very intense here.
And the problem is when you're 50 and haven't been super active in terms of sports for a couple of decades, at least, really probably 3 decades.
Sure.
Your brain has all the wiring and memories of when you were 20, but your body doesn't have the same capabilities at all. And you get yourself into situations you shouldn't be in. And for whatever reason, makes no sense whatsoever, but for whatever reason, the softball league was played with a larger, sort of softer ball, but you were prohibited from wearing a glove. So I was far from the only person who broke a finger playing this ridiculous softball style. And the kickball, for whatever reason, it's sort of sneaky dangerous. I don't know why people are getting hurt playing kickball, but I collided with a 6'5", 250-pound young, very strong man. And when I was 20, my bone would not have snapped probably, but at 50, the wrist did not hold up. So I think the only person who has like announced a retirement from Serenbe rec sports leagues, not in one sport, let alone 2.
Sure. They should really have a ceremony and like retire your jersey.
Press conference.
Have it hanging along a fence back there. But for a long time, it will just be one jersey. This is Mathis.
That's right. I like that thought.
So you've retired from the Serenbe sports?
At least temporarily, There's always a possibility I could come out of retirement. That would be a big moment, I'm sure. But
okay, I'm going to take one more caller. Another one of your coworkers wanted me to ask you, what makes the Kings of Leon set at Bonnaroo so impactful?
That's the best Abby could come up with, I guess.
Is this the wow, like you want to talk about it for so long, we don't have enough time on the podcast?
No, that's just like super niche-y.
She did say it was, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really deep, highly specific cut. But Abby and I, let's say we share a love of music.
Okay.
And Abby was a frequent Bonnaroo attendee. I think I only went one time, but we bonded over that at some point. And I shared an old DVD that featured the Kings of Leon while they were riding in a van together from gig to gig, like long before anyone really knew who they were. So she must have enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely stuck with her. That's what it sounds like. I want to touch on one other activity, I'm going to call it, that you are very active in, and that is Thursday night trivia at Halsa. You're part of a team there. Can't remember the name. Maybe somebody will remember it. And you guys win a lot. You want to talk about maybe the makeup of that team, how it came together, everybody's love of trivia? Yeah,
some things, the origin story of Rushmore, which is a name that you clearly do remember.
Maybe.
It's sort of a mythical at this point. No one really remembers exactly how we came together, but it is a group of men and women who have a deep love of trivia, in particular the style of trivia that is done at Halsa every other Thursday night.
By Abe. Shout out to Abe.
Shout out to Super Geek Trivia.
Yep.
Abe is the best.
The best.
And we just like to compete. We're competitors. And our theme, our mantra, if you will, is humility. We really like to promote sportsmanship and the honor of competing, and happy whether we win or lose.
You guys are actually good sports for the most part.
I know.
What I've noticed is every other team becomes really bad sports based on how much you win.
They all hate us. They boo us. They yell terrible things. But we don't actually do anything, I think, to deserve that other than win and put together a trophy book to show off a collection of the gift cards that you win. Each time you win.
It's a subtle book, though. You just have it on the table. It's not like you're walking it around.
Yeah, we just have it on display on the table. You're not required
to thumb through it and see all the awards.
Right. That's a good time for the neighborhood. We do really enjoy that.
That is so fun. And it has really taken off even more than the neighborhood, in that I attend, like, coworkers have a team, and then people from my neighborhood come, and I live in what we call Serenbe, and people are coming in from Abe's other evenings, and I think they like how it's like a tight knit group at Halsa, and they're actually, even though you guys are bearing the brunt of it, there is this like sort of camaraderie that is all of us against you. Yeah.
Yeah. We're happy to play that role.
Sure.
To be the bonding agent for all the trivia.
Right.
Bonding people through their mutual hatred of us.
So because you're my first Serenbe employee, I've been thinking about the format of my podcast. And I think at this time, with every employee, I would like to play a little, would you rather? Do you know this game?
I'm familiar with the game, yes.
Yeah, but I've made your version a Gil version, and it's called What's Worse?
Okay, yes, that feels better.
I knew it would. Okay, great. Here's my first question for you. What's worse? Rushmore loses 5 weeks in a row, or Excel spreadsheets do not exist?
Oh, wow. I don't think there's a world where Rushmore exists if Excel spreadsheets don't exist. So I think
what a Gil answer.
I think it has to be Excel spreadsheets not existing.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't really envision me operating in the world if that's true. If
spreadsheets don't exist?
Yes.
Yes. Yep, that tracks.
Much less being on a winning trivia team.
All right. Are you ready for question number 2?
Yes, this is great.
What's worse? Your coworkers talk to you the whole time you are in the office.
That one.
Or flannel shirts and graphic tees are banned in the U.S.
I think the talk to one for sure.
Just right off the bat, that sounded so awful to you.
You said the whole time, right?
The whole time, which I actually feel like we already do.
And you don't have to qualify with coworkers. Any environment that I'm in where people are just going to talk to me the entire time, that's not going to work.
You need a pause.
I need a pause. I have a lot of really good friends here and a lot of great relationships, but I'm hardcore introvert who is very much invested in, small group and those relationships on that basis. Just being in a place where people want to talk to me all the time, it's not ideal.
It's funny you say that because one of your good friends was in the office this morning getting something notarized. And he immediately started talking about how he doesn't like for anybody to talk to him in public.
Jeny was here.
No, different friend.
Okay.
But this explains your close group of friends. It was George Coyne.
Yeah, that totally tracks.
Yep. Yeah. And now I just imagine that you guys all get together and just sit in a quiet room.
And gamble.
And but on your phones, so you don't have to talk to each other.
Text each other.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's happy.
Yeah, there's sports on, playing poker maybe,
Yeah.
gambling on the sports and texting each other. That's fine. That's a great evening.
Sure. Gil, I think this question will get a lot of traction from residents and your coworkers. What is something, just one thing, that people would be surprised to know about you?
I would say my love of musical theater. Yes, I wanted to see that look on your face with that answer. Little known, but yeah, Jeny and I have enjoyed for many years with our two daughters, lots and lots of musical theater. And I revealed this recently on a trip. We went on a trip with our friends, Katrina and George, just earlier this year. And Katrina and I sang really the whole soundtrack to Les Mis.
Wow.
And Jeny and George were really over it by the end because I go hard as Jean Valjean. And
Sure. And not a lot of upbeat songs from that
Javert.
musical.
Oh,
Real depressing trip.
That's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, I love musical theater and I'm not ashamed to show it in the right environment.
Speaking of which, is it true that you grew out your sideburns with almost no end in sight after you saw the musical Hair?
Well, it was mostly true. It was a little more expansive than that. Just working in the real estate office and with the musical production for the summer in Serenbe being Hair, I grew my hair out longer and had really large Joe Cocker style sideburns to just promote the summer of Hair. I think I saw the show 12 times with Jeny and sold real estate in that format. It was a good sort of icebreaker. Even if my coworkers really hated it a lot, I found it to be effective in, reeling potential customers in.
I'm looking at your sideburns right now.
Yep.
Are you preparing for another show?
Halloween costume. I'm sure this will air after Halloween. So, it won't? Well, then.
I think just prior to Halloween.
Well, I don't want to reveal because there's a lot of people trying to find out, who are you going to be for Halloween, Gil?
I feel safe right now knowing it's not me.
I've agreed with one of my friends and neighbors here to be a musical duo from the 80s who dress alike and sport.
I know exactly who it
sideburns such as this. I have arranged with our local hair salon to trim and dye the sideburns appropriately just prior to Halloween for maximum effectiveness.
As always, very thorough. So every episode of Serenbe Stories wraps up with talking about if you were willing to talk to a stranger and you were talking about Serenbe and they said, we're going to come for the weekend. What is maybe the number one thing you would suggest they do?
Well, I could cheat a little bit having worked for the real estate team for so long, as my normal introvert self would have a hard time answering that question probably. But I would say, well, when it depends, or if you're just visiting for a weekend away to have fun, then, you may already have a purpose to see an event or eat at a restaurant or whatever, or maybe you just want to relax. And all those things are very possible here. And you should do what you came to do and just enjoy the fact that the shoulders will lower and the blood pressure will lower as you get into the environment. If you are here in any way, shape, or form with the idea that you could possibly want to live here or see yourself living here, then for sure, I would say talk to people. Try to find residents. They're everywhere. They're not that hard to find, but try to find one and talk to them and just ask, do you live here? And what do you think about it? Because people who live here tend to love it and tend to want to talk about it. In many cases like my own, it has literally changed their life in a positive way, and they want to share that. And Serenbe is about a lot of things for a lot of people, for me, ultimately, the people are the secret ingredient, the magic and the connections that you make with people. And so getting some exposure to that by talking to people who live here gives you an insight into what Serenbe is better than almost anything you can just see by, walking around the neighborhood.
Sure. And the last question I'm going to close all of the Human Resources podcast sessions with is, who is your favorite coworker and why?
Favorite coworker, for sure, Katrina. There's no question. I mean, she's a celebrity. I feel like being on this podcast, you probably kind of have to say Katrina, like you probably ought to. But in reality, Katrina is one of my best friends. Katrina and her husband, George, were very close to my wife and I. And so seeing each other in the office is a little different, but, not so different. And I do like everyone here, mostly. No, I like everyone here, but we're pretty close outside the office as well.
And now I'm picturing the four of you hanging out, you and your wife and Katrina and her husband, George, and only Jeny is talking.
No, George is extroverted too. So Jeny and George always need to be like, what are we doing and where are we going? And Katrina and I are like, well, I mean, we could just sit here and watch a television show. We just end up chatting.
In silence. All right, that was a good answer. Gil, thanks for being my first guest.
Oh, I'm honored, truly.
On this podcast takeover.
You did a great job.
Thanks, Gil.